Ladies and gentlemen, Julie saved the day. Well, it's good time. I'll do it again. My name's Tim Sudano, your favorite paranormal investigator. This is Paranormal Insight, and welcome once again. Hello to big thanks to Julie, and hello to Heidi in the chat. If you want to join us in the chat, please do so. I have across the bottom of the screen our chat address. This goes through my YouTube. If you want to go through the UPRN YouTube, feel free. That's fantastic. So today's thing continues our search, our quest, if you will, to find what is mythical and how it blends into the factual, and especially in these later decades, where science has really stepped up and said, "Oh my gosh, that was true. Oh my gosh, that was true," and we keep seeing that over and over. Well, tonight's topic is no different. We're going to look at giants. So let us get into that. We know I'm going to read some stuff. We know that giants have loomed large, forgive the pun, in human imagination for centuries. Appearing in myths, religious texts, folklore from pretty much every corner of the world. And they have their symbology, and they have their, I don't know, anthropological slash psychological explanations, but we're going to explore what makes the giant a real a real possibility in our past and our present, because we've all seen these interesting videos pop up of these giant things walking across the crests of mountains. Some of it could be CG, but some of this stuff is from well before CG was readily available to the public. So, gotta take some of these things into consideration. So, let's talk about your friends and mine. I'm gonna skip a slide here. Is it going? Is it working? It's not going or working. Great. Just gonna, okay, well, that's plain full blown. So let's go here. What we have here are the Titans from Greek mythology, or an interpretation thereof, anyway. And these guys were, well, giants, and the very realistic, what you would describe as giants. They were an ancient race of gigantic deities. Basically, they were the parents to, especially in the case of oh my gosh, Kronos, I believe, the father of the gods of Greece, who sometimes themselves appeared to be giant. So there's this. It's called Titanomancy. I may be mispronouncing that, and I apologize if I am. It supposedly tells of the struggle between humans and nature, and the forces of chaos versus the forces of civilization. And we all know that one Titan, really like man in Greek mythology, Apollo. Was he a god? No, I think he was a Titan, but don't quote me on that. I'm not the mythology guy, per se. And I'm kind of going off script for my slides, but he gave us fire. So according to Greek mythology, he's the one who gave us fire and allow us to see and hunt and interact, not hunt necessarily, but to stay warm at night, to light our way if we had to go somewhere at night. Prior to that, apparently we just stumbled around the dark or stayed in our little camps or caves or whatever it was before we became more civilized. Although, again, this is mythology. Mythology typically describes what our ancestors potentially did to explain away the unexplainable. Where they got the names from, where they got the stories from, that's something kind of different. I mean, maybe there was one of the best writers in the world in humanity's ancient past, and he said, you know what happened? But if we're going that far back into our history, the Titans are around during the times when men still lived in caves, if memory serves, and at least according to my research and my own slide notes here. So, I don't know, man. That's a lot of stuff to keep track of. Some people could do it even today. Really have organized minds, and they could just pull that stuff out of their filing cabinet, if you will. But at the same time, you have to think about what was super important. Okay, food, shelter, and safety. Usually in numbers, usually in cliques, tribes, if you will. And this is kind of what gave rise to the people living in villages initially. Okay, so let's say all this happens. We have these giants who are called Titans, and they have a command to one degree or another of the elements, as depicted in our fun little thing here. They're hurling. Well, they're not hurling, but they're posing and all that fun stuff. This is AI. That's what AI came up with, not me. And it's a lot cheaper on the copyright side of things too. So so this is what was interpreted as Titans, and they were gigantic. You looked at them pretty much at this perspective according to the Greek mythology. And at one point later on down the line, they spawn the Greek gods. The Greek gods defeat and or slay the Titans because they still have the Titans' abilities to command all this stuff. Zeus, but it got a little more parsed out in mythology. Zeus had his lightning. I'm blanking on the guy who had the control of the sun. Helios. Helios had control of the sun, so on and so forth. But again, if you're taking a completely scientific, anthropological approach at this, you're looking at ways for humans to explain what's going on. But I put it to you once again: who developed these gods, their backstories, and all that fun stuff? Now, we could look at history itself and find parallels to the Sumerian gods. Now, I don't know of too many Sumerians who migrated to Greece and said, I got a story for you. And maybe that's what happened. Who knows? But hey, Patsy's on the chat. Hi, Patsy. But anyway, if this is inherited mythology and or stories and or what really happened, we might be looking at a form of if you want to go this far. If you want to go this far, and I absolutely encourage you to do your own research on this. It is a bit of a rabbit hole, but it's still fascinating. Perhaps this inherited mythology, names got changed, obviously. Motives among the gods themselves got changed as well, to one degree or another. But if these are inherited, we're actually kind of planting a flag of sorts in ancient astronaut theory. And it kind of yes and no. So if the Sumerians or the Anunnaki gods or whatever they really were actually aliens from space, again following the ancient astronaut theory, their stories, and then they took off, and that's riding on the backs of according to Zechariah Stitchin all the way through his immediate cadre of disciples, all the way through to Billy Carson, who pretty much echoes a lot of the same stuff Stitchen did or does, or however it is you want to look at it. So we have a group of people also who, interestingly, the Sumerian gods rather, were depicted as giants. That should be really taken in. That's the note. Because we have, and I wish I had a picture of it, but I don't. Again, copyright issues. But they're seen holding lions like cats. Lions, okay? Like house cats. They're that big. That's kind of saying something. And going up against, well, I guess beasts, if you want to call them that, where, and I did my own volume just now because I heard a little bit of feedback in my ear. So if I go a little quiet, it's not you, it's me. But yeah, I mean, a Sumerian guy standing something on the order of about, 16 feet tall, give or take, holding a lion like a house cat. Okay. We move on a little bit. In the Sumerian tradition, we also have the story, and it's again picked up later on, of Gilgamesh, who was a king, but he was also depicted and told to be a giant, and he also, for some reason, battled lions who were cat-sized. House cat-sized. Rezero. I hope I pronounced that correctly, sir. Welcome. Sir? Gosh, I can't see things on my computer. Anyway, welcome to the chat. Welcome to the show. But we have a series of people in ancient history that was recorded in our written record, as far back as the written record goes, that we had a bunch of big, gigantic people walking around. So, and there's another aspect to kind of consider. In the earlier days of our planet, we had huge animals and arachnids and insects. They were freaking gigantic, mostly because the oxygen content, at least this is the explanation, the oxygen content on the planet was a lot higher. And so these bigger creatures could absorb more oxygen. And it's true, there is a threshold of size that if you get too big, you're actually going to choke because there's not enough oxygen to keep you kind of, your body satiated. You're actually going to start passing out because you're too darn big to intake enough oxygen. That sounds a little silly, but it's just the mixture of our air currently is more ideal for someone our size. I'm relatively average size. I'm 6 foot. So someone my size, maybe a little bit bigger. I mean, we have basketball players, for example. They're pretty tall and they survive okay. But I digress. We have all these people in our past that were decidedly larger. We also have animal records, as well as, fossil records, as well as, pretty much that, and telling, tales and all that fun stuff of, what some of the first, I think they were Spanish, maybe they were French explorers who went to the Amazon, described spiders the size of buildings, houses. Good times. So if you have tarantulas running around the size of a house, there's probably a reasonable oxygen content to be able to support it, because that's big. I don't want to even think about a spider that size, to be completely honest with you, but I'd, again, digress. So there is a scientific kind of meshing that's able to explain people, humans, or humanoids of that size who are able to thrive. And it can, as we go through time, we still can see more and more giants pop up in our collective past. So let's go to the next slide. It won't work for some reason. I hit the play button. we go. Okay. So here we have the nope, it didn't change on here. Did it? This is silly. That no, it's not showing up. That's really bizarre. Okay, so I'll go out and I'll go back in to my slideshow because for some reason it just doesn't like it. There we go. Okay. I will see if I can. There we go. All right. Sorry, I gave you a little. No, I didn't. Share my screen again. That one. Share it. Ta-da! Okay, so here we have the next slide in our show. No, it isn't. These, I skipped ahead. I'm going to have to go back. These are the Jotnar of Jotunheim. Frost giants, more commonly known as frost giants. And these guys were they are said to embody the wild, the untamed forces of nature. You know, that's kind of a repeated theme throughout when you talk about giants versus people, which is kind of silly. But they had a frequent clash with the Aesir gods, which, you know, Odin and Thor and Loki and all those guys. And they just kind of represented a force that could reckon, or at least meet to a degree, the gods. So we have the Jotuns, or oh, you don't see them, do you? Huh? How silly! Let me add to that to the stage of the air. There's the Jotuns, frost giants. So these guys are. Oh, sorry, my nose allergies are kicking up over here. These guys are chiefly in opposition to the Norse gods. Chiefly, there is a few more complex figures, and you know, we discovered that the Jotuns are every bit as much like people, regular old people, because they have families, and they have, you know, responsibilities, and they have farms, for crying out loud. I mean, it's kind of intriguing. And where have we heard this before? We have heard this in the story of the Jinn, who live in a dimension right next door to us. They can see us, we can't see them, but they live lives virtually parallel to our own. Jobs, kids, family, possibly vehicles and traffic and, you know, the whole thing. Taxes, who knows? But if we go back to, are they giants? Sometimes they are represented as being giants. It's interesting. So we have the Jinn, which we don't really get into here because I already talked about the Jinn a little bit on a, yes, yeah. Heidi agrees with me. So it's fascinating to really kind of dig into this stuff and see a lot of the parallels. And this is kind of what this entire series has been about. I cannot talk lately. Okay, so we have our Jotun friends here, who are, again, the frost giants of Norse mythology, but when we come to Greek mythology again, and I think we're basically in the same general era. I mean, we're talking a span of overlap here, maybe 1,000 to 2,000 years. So while this was going on in the north, all this weird stuff, other weird stuff was happening in Greece. Which was, nope, that's the thing. Yeah, there we go. Our friend the Cyclops. Now, according to Greek mythology, they were they were craftsmen, brutish craftsmen. I don't know how you really combine those things, but you have a guy who is, again, gigantic in stature, literally. At least I think they described him as being so many odd cubits, and I think it equaled something like 16 feet tall, which seems to be a running theme throughout the ancient world when you talk about large people. They were They had brute strength, but they were remarkable craftsmen, and they were credited with forging Zeus's thunderbolts. They also were credited for building the fortification of the walls, the fortification walls. I can't talk. I'm so sorry. Of Mycena. Yeah, Mycena. So we have big British guys who are really good at crafting things in the larger scale. And apparently godlike weapons, which is intriguing. They were given one eye by design, according to a lot of the mythology, which is interesting, but it made them focus more. It also killed any sense of three-dimensional vision, if you want to get all like super technical about it, but I digress. So if you don't know where the hammer goes, you kind of just have to trust your instinct as you're forging all this stuff out. That's just me. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe they work together. Who knows? They were the children of Poseidon, and I believe their mother was mortal, like human. So I guess they started off as normal-sized babies and grew up to these big dudes, standing 6 foot tall, and there were like 3 or 4 of them. They were all brothers, and they had, again, there's a lot of duality to these creatures. They, at the time, they were both feared and revered, which is a funny way to kind of look at it. But if we have creatures like the Cyclops versus the creatures like Jotnar, we kind of have, again, similar stories. They're both feared and revered. They have the ability to stand up to the gods, maybe not overcome them, or at least initially they might, but I mean, just through sheer brute force. And then we have the Cyclops that have the added talent of being able to craft weapons that only the gods could use, again, according to mythology. So you have this fantastic, just, I don't know, it's like someone kept changing the rules as things went wrong. Oh no, these guys don't do, they do this and that. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you about this particular talent they have. But we have okay, I'll just move on because I'm gonna talk far too much. Let's talk about something. Actually, this kind of plays into what I was going for. Let's talk about a creature known as the Nephilim. Now, there are varying takes on the Nephilim. When I said Nephilim to the AI, it came up with this. So we have a bunch of bigger dudes, and then little dudes as well. Humans, regular old humans, and they're kind of working together. So the Nephilim were these enigmatic, I can't talk, gosh. These bigger than life, no pun intended, figures. They get a mention in the book of Genesis as offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men. If you look at other religious texts, specifically the Quran, and this is thanks to Sammer, who was on our show the other week, he said, well, it's a really kind of gone into in the Quran. It's like they were the watchers. They were supposed to just keep an eye on humanity because God was taking a break, apparently. I don't know. That's just my interpretation, honestly. But keep an eye on these folks, and I'm gonna go do something else. Maybe just create another planet. I couldn't even begin to speak to that. But as these Nephilim are watching over humanity, they get the hots for the female of the human species, and so they come down to Earth, and they Actually, I'm sorry, that's not the Nephilim. That's the Watchers. Ha ha, I goofed. I goofed hardcore. Sorry, let's start over. The Watchers are there. Angels watching over Earth, making sure humanity doesn't falter and destroy itself. Or something along those lines, because God's off doing something else. But as they're watching over perhaps centuries, they get a feeling for, and I guess they have major crushes on the female of the species, humans, and the sons of God and the daughters of men made Nephilim, who ended up being giants among men, and that's where we get this image, or an interpretation along these lines, where we have these giant individuals who are kind of, again, we have creatures super tall, again, roughly 16 feet, who, I mean, that's a tall part, that's almost 2 stories tall. That's a tall individual. And they have all these gifts, all this knowledge, and yet they're gigantic and brutish, and, you know, they evoke both fear and reverence. Let's go with that one. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear that outside, but someone's doing jackhammering outside my door. My apologies for that. Oh, no, there they go. Now they're revving up their gear. Anyway, if that's translating, my apologies. I'll talk over it. You kind of hear it in the background a little bit. So these Nephilim around, and they have the same freaking thing as the Cyclops. They have, you know, they're feared and revered. Same thing as the Jotuns, feared and revered. All of them have these weird talents and pieces of knowledge and that they really shouldn't have, and they pass them down to humanity. So humanity kind of benefits from these guys in the end, for the most part. And as we go on into the story of the Nephilim and all that fun stuff, we actually kind of come into the modern day a little bit. And I don't have any pictures to represent this, so I'll just have to tell it to you. Not long ago, there was a quasi-docu series. It was pretty well done about when we were involved in, and in the U.S. specifically, actually, not just the U.S., but when, by and large, most of the, like, United Nations forces, not UN specifically, but, okay, U.S., British, and Australia specifically, were in Afghanistan fighting terrorists and all that fun stuff. Well, none of it was fun stuff. They all 3 branches, all 3 countries, had people on the ground report on giants aiding the Taliban and aiding other groups in Kandahar, or near Kandahar, the mountains of Kandahar specifically. And they caught them on thermal infrared, on their, binoculars. They caught them on drones, and they caught them, face-to-face-ish encounters. Like, the soldiers are hiding, and suddenly these big feet come walking by, and there are these people. They're humans, except they're 12 to 16 feet high. Again, we come back to 16 feet. And that's a modern story. A lot of people will say, well, they're making it up. They got to be making it up. And they, a mission went sideways and they just decided to throw this into the, against the wall and see if it stuck as an excuse, maybe for a mission going sideways. Not from 3 different countries, 3 different areas where there was no overlap, no cross communication. I mean, maybe there were stories, but of these stories that came through back and that got reported back, the cadre kept going, what is going on? Because it was proving to be not a story more and more and more. I was like, oh man, what are they doing? Is this an experiment? Did they create these 16-foot beasts to aid them in their efforts? they were, command on all three of all three countries was widely confused until they saw the footage. And mind you, the footage shown in the documentary of the Giants of Kandahar, I believe it's called. Don't quote me on that. I think that may have been the movie they made about that thing, which was fictitious or at least narrative. I'm talking about it sounds like they're right outside my door, the gardeners. But they don't come on Thursdays. But anyway, so the more and more and more of these reports keep coming back to command of these three different countries, and they finally do communicate with one another at the upper echelons, and they say, what is going on? We are seeing reports of 16-foot individuals and seeing drone footage and thermal footage of these individuals, at least communicating with, if not aiding, certain factions of the Taliban. Or was it the Taliban? Oh gosh. Terrorists. Of the terrorist factions. And I don't put that in quotes lightly because, the bad stuff was happening. They're enacting a certain level of law. I don't want to get too political here. But, I don't know, if a guy walks into your face with a gun to your head, it depends on whose side you're looking at. So anyway, there was a focused effort to be bad to humanity and all that fun stuff. But I digress. I pull back from the political side of all that. But the fact remains that these 16-foot creatures were there. And the locals were able to talk with them, communicate with them. And these guys were kind of not too far from what's being depicted in the picture there. They wore tarps for boots, and some of them even had armor that was pulled off of and refashioned from Russian tanks from the previous Afghan conflict there. So it's amazing that we have a modern day reference to pointing the wrong way, to these creatures. It just blows my mind. I hope it does the same for you, because it certainly makes me think. Okay, so let's talk about, let's go back to the past for a little bit. Giants in the Old Testament. I think you all know where I'm going to go with this. If it works, which it isn't because it's being a butt. Okay. Yep. That's where I'm going. That's the stuff right there. Good old David and Goliath. A young man whips a stone at a 16-foot giant. Again, we're dealing with a 16-foot individual. It just keeps happening over and over and over. It seems to be the magic number. And defeats him with a stone thrown from a sling. And if you've ever seen a stone, this is a river stone, so it's kind of big and it's smooth, and so it's quasi aerodynamic anyway. And if you've seen some of these guys whip this thing with a not a slingshot, but an old school single strap sling, the accuracy and speed is not unlike a bullet. Perhaps not as fast as a bullet, but nonetheless bullet-like. And they can sling it quite a distance, and they can sling it with exceptional accuracy. So this guy, these two individuals here, we have our David representative here and our Goliath representative way over there. I can't get my cursor that far for some reason. This guy. Up against what is effectively a bullet. Yeah, good luck blocking a bullet. Honestly. And he gets him square in the head and does him in. Whether the rock penetrated, I don't know, but the human brain, human head, no matter how large it is, can only sustain so much impact. So he probably whipped this thing with all of his might, and I think the stones were semi-blessed too, by God, if I remember the story correctly. And it's a bullet. Boom, he's dead. So now we have the Philistines' hero dead on the ground, and if I remember correctly, the Philistines retreat and or surrender. I cannot remember which, but it was a victory for the other guys. Now, this may also kind of expand on it with the presence of Goliath there in the first place on the Nephilim story. So they were kind of known to be they always get, well, they kind of are said to have really kind of bartered with their power, just their size and their abilities in general. I mean, if you're 16 foot tall, you can pick up a truck, there's something that heavy pretty easily. And we're kind of also dipping into the Nephilim or giants being, well, I guess the labor force behind some of our larger wonders. The Legend of Solomon. He commanded beasts and large individuals to build his temple. The Egyptians. There's been tons of thoughts on the Egyptians, anything from hard labor. I mean, they did have pretty much the entire Jewish population at their disposal to move these things. And they recently discovered that they used a lot of wet sand to move those giant blocks around. But if we had giant people able to lift these blocks with a great deal more ease, because they're so much bigger and more powerful and stronger and yada, yada, yada. Okay, well, there you go. I mean, that does track to one degree or another. Historically, can we prove this? Historically, no. And the Egyptians, they wrote everything down. They just discovered, I think, the Temple of Moses, really, recently, off one chamber or another in one of the pyramids, and or at least it tells the story of Moses. It's not, they don't suspect it's Moses in the casket there because he was supposed to take his people home. But I digress. Getting back to our story, we still have these 16-foot individuals that keep occurring and appearing in various stages of our history. I mean, globally. It's insane. The British have their own people, their own giants, and that's not one. Whoops. And that's a representative. Oh, that's another giant. And that's a representative of a British and or Celtic giant, which I will show you right now. There he is. Celtic and British folklore abound with tales of giants who shaped the landscape and history. Again, they got the size. Why wouldn't they? The Giant's Causeway in Ireland, for example, is said to have been built by a specific giant named Fionn MacCamhail. And he did it so he can cross over to Scotland. Okay. These stories... Such stories connect giants immediately with the land. Okay, that's an anthropological take. But, I mean, if you have an individual in history, be it folklore or not, with a specific task to build a bridge, a land bridge, if you will, from Ireland to Scotland, I mean, you kind of have to go, what was the purpose of telling that particular tale? Was it reflective of the locals of Ireland wanting to go to Scotland or vice versa? Who knows? I mean, again, anthropologically, more scientifically, such legends reveal how ancient peoples used giant myths to make sense of their surroundings. Well, we kind of already knew that. That's what a lot of mythology does. And I think there's a layer of myth within the mythology. I think there's a layer in anything we of our past that has a spark of truth, because you don't just create the stuff out of the blue. Now, it could be inherited folklore, like we had with the Sumerians to the Greeks and so on and so forth. And that happened a lot. Sumerian folklore, or Greek folklore echoed Sumerian folklore, and Egyptian folklore echoed similar folklore. I think also Sumerian, if not Mesopotamian. And, so there's a lot of mix and matching happening. Although the Egyptians went that extra mile and put animal heads on everyone. Don't ask me why, but they did. There's a big explanation anthropologically for that as well, but I will not go into them here because it's a little. I don't buy into it personally. So we have. Oh, hey, it's another cave dude. Okay, I'll go here anyway. So we have a giant barbarian like, oh, I don't know what that is. I hit the wrong button. Aha, there he is. So we have another giant person here who, according to Native American folklore, was indicative of a race of such creatures. Reddish hair. We've heard that story before in Kandahar, Afghanistan, and over there. From modern legends to ancient legends of the area. Red-headed, again, large people. These were described as being closer to 12 foot. Some 16, but definitely larger than normal men. The Native American tribes, and I mean tribes like across North America, that's Canada and America and the U.S., folks, North America in its entirety, and even into Mexico, there was a few. I think it was Oaxaca had a legend of giants. I swear I can talk, but these, they sometimes they were portrayed as spirit people, but there's a very specific tale, which I'll go into in a little bit, regarding Native Americans who were having trouble with this faction of giants that kept, ransacking their fields and killing their herds. Well, they didn't really keep herds per se, but some did. But it was it was damaging them. Again, I'll get into that a little bit. But okay, so we have more similarities stretching not only down from history, but now we have two locations that have virtually the identical creature. 12 to 16 foot tall, reddish hair, brutish, gigantic, powerful, and had a need to just take what they want and really kind of put a dent in Native American lifestyle. We'll get back to those guys in a little bit. Let us move on to Africa. Africa actually has their own giant legend. They feature various giant figures, often depicted as powerful spirits or ancestral beings with extraordinary powers. Okay, so if you're ancestral, that means, from your past, that either your immediate family or your elders of your tribe, for lack of a better word, had, they passed a few stories down. And I mean, they play roles in everything from the creation myths to, moral stories, cultural rituals that kind of focus on maintaining social order and spiritual balance. That is to say that these giants did not necessarily act this way. They were more brutish and disruptive and chaotic. Well, isn't that, we've heard that story before too. I mean, that was last week. The Fae were supposed to be that way. Or, I'm sorry, not the Fae, but the Tuatha De Danann, if you recall, were the enlightened, like literally they glowed, people who came to the island and took out those two various tribes that were suspiciously Viking-like. And they were supposed to be chaotic individuals and more brutish. So we keep seeing this theme play over and over and over in various parts of the world throughout our very general global history, especially in the ancient worlds. Again, it says here, giants were portrayed as being both feared and revered because some of them, not all of them, but some of them reached out to the lowly humans and taught them various skills, including agriculture and a few other things, but they also acted as protectors. Well, yeah, a big dude who's 12 to 16 foot tall could definitely protect you from a few different things, especially if they could pick up a lion like a house cat and chuck it out into the back of the thing. I don't know if you ever had a cat ticked off at you, though, from personal experience, and you go away. You toss them away or scoot them across the floor. They'll come back after you, and they'll attack. Not that I'm mean to my cats. I don't have cats. They passed natural causes, just so you know. I'm not mean to animals. But, I know cats are a little twitchy sometimes. And you say, go away. And they'll just come after you because they think you're prey. But I digress and digest. Okay. So moving on to Asian tradition, this one's kind of fun. We get a little more spiritual with these guys. We have the Rakshasa. Now, the Rakshasa is a weird-looking, evil-looking thing. And they're described as being giant demons known for their supernatural powers and malevolent behavior. They're also known, this is Hindu mythology chiefly, but they're also known as being giant. They're like freaking huge, like, again, 16 feet, some 20. They're featured prominently in epics like the Ramayana, and they challenge the gods and heroes. Oh no, we've heard that story before too. They embody chaos and moral corruption. So these giants have been put into this role of being morally corrupt, causing chaos wherever they go, and let alone basic destruction because of their size. And their stories tend to always highlight that dichotomy. The, order versus disorder, or order out of chaos, or what have you. So, yeah. Thank you, Heidi. Heidi thinks I'm teaching her new stuff. That's awesome. So the Rakshasa echoes the Jotuns, who echo the Nephilim, who echo. You get my point. So maybe we're dealing with the same creatures, just being interpreted different ways. I mean, if this is a Rakshasa, and this is relatively accurate according to the statuary created that aren't supposed to be Rakshasa in the the Hinduism reached pretty far. So from the South Pacific regions all the way into India. Pardon my cough. Hold on. Excuse me. So yeah, they were depicted as being giant things with glowing eyes and horns. That's actually relatively accurate. and you can talk about the symbology of why they're so big, because, they're an overwhelming force meant to give us lowly humans something to overcome in the archaeological standpoint, anthropological standpoint. Then we get a little more spiritual in in Japan when we talk about the Oni. Yeah, the Oni, not the nicest of creatures in the world, but the Oni were ogre-like. Okay, so we have an AI example here of what I don't think they were quite that big, but they're still supposed to be pretty giant. So ogre-like giants in Japanese folklore are often depicted with horns. Yes, horns. Wild hair and fierce expressions, so they were snarling all the time, not unlike the Rakshasa. They are both feared as malevolent spirits and respected as protectors in certain contexts. Again, we have that thing crop up, feared and revered. It just amazes me that theme keeps cropping up in all these giant related creatures throughout our ancient and sometimes modern history. Feared protector. They demonstrated complex cultural attitudes. So now they're teachers of proper culture or of a higher culture. As far as being represented in the more modern times, they appear in festivals, art, and literature as symbols of both danger and strength. Their dual nature reflects a broader theme in Japanese culture regarding the coexistence of good and evil, order and chaos. Oh my gosh, the theme continues to repeat itself. The Oni embody the chaotic and unpredictable aspects of life, reminding people to stay vigilant and strive for harmony. Okay. And now we get a little bit deeper into what the giants, what have they done for us lately? Well, not too far down the line, they kind of did something cool. Or at least that's the report. That this is a representation of Stonehenge. Not the actual place, but it's still a pretty cool shot. The original one, just to let you know, had I'll use my cursor about right here. There's a giant robot-looking thing. I'm not kidding you. It was 16 foot tall ish, but it was a giant robot moving these stones, and I just couldn't bring myself to use it. As entertaining as it was. So, okay, so when it comes to megalithic monuments, giants typically, and again, we cited some of the examples. Solomon controlled his giant demonic forces. Okay, now we have more parallels. And Egypt was potentially, they never really said so in their writings, but they were potentially using giants to lift some of the heavier things, put them into place. That's a more modern myth, but it's nothing we can secure or say that happened for sure. But when it comes to megalithic monuments, like Stonehenge, pyramids, and other large stone circle things, I mean, even in the highlands of Central and South America, in Mexico, I mean, Teotihuacan, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, has two layers to it. There's the megalithic layer, and then there's the ones that humans built on top of it. So, the scale and precision of these monuments inspire stories, according to the anthropological aspect, that only beings of enormous strength could have built them. Well, that kind of makes sense. And again, if we look at the Earth's record. There's a lot more oxygen way back then, and it stands to reason that human beings could have benefited from such gigantism themselves without having gigantism. It was just, a natural feature of humans. But getting back to the text, legends also reveal how societies sought to explain and legitimize monumental architecture through myth. Okay, again, that is the anthropological explanation. There's something to be said, though, for this being at least partially true. It's not like we don't have tall people today. It's not like we haven't had tall people in the past. Tall people tend to be more powerful people. Tend to be more powerful people. So it's entirely possible this type of thing could have been, especially way back when we weren't as, I guess nitrogen. Well, I don't know. Our air mixture wasn't what it is today. It was more oxygen rich and just really lent to a lot of bigger creatures across the planet. Just look at the mammalian record. I mean, mammoths and other such things, and giant sloths, and like I said, tarantulas in the Amazon the size of a house. And that's relatively modern. That was like, I want to say 16th, 17th, no, about 17th century. I think that was an exploration. That was by a British force too, I believe. They said, "Hey, big old one just goes storming through the woods," and not too long ago, we lost a few men to him. I digress. So we also have something that plays into, and we talked about gigantism a little bit, but first let's talk about the fossil record briefly. The fossil record has been, that's the Oni. There we go. The fossil record has brought some of this to light, that it's a lot of a mistaken identity. Oh, I found giant human bones. Oh no, you found a dinosaur bone. Okay, well, it's true. We have mammoths and mastodons, dinosaurs, all those guys who have contributed to our fossil finds throughout the year. And most times, especially in modern days, we can usually pick and choose what goes where to what animal, or at least to the general phylum of animal. When it comes to human remains that are of gigantic proportion, there is one in Turkey that I do not have a picture of that comes to mind, and I will tell you a little bit about it. The one about, so this is Turkey, I'd say about as early as 5 to 10 years ago. There was a dig in Turkey near Mount Ararat, and where Moses was and his family were supposedly buried. And in doing a little digging there, these archaeologists come up with a finger bone. Big deal. They come up with a finger bone. Okay, the finger bone was about the size of my water bottle. And it belonged to this knuckle right here, this bone. And that's in a direct comparison to the modern fossil record of humans. Same bone, same shape, same in knuckle joint interactions and what have you, but this big. Could have been a giant gorilla. They had them back then, but it doesn't fit the gorilla morphology. It was human. Now, it's the only one they found. Had they found a giant leg bone, okay, I'd be a little more convinced. It would be a little more easy to convince the world that there was a species, a race, a what have you, of these giant human individuals. When it comes to finger bones, though, you get a little thing, but I cannot deny the morphology. You can look that up for yourself. I invite you to, absolutely. But the morphology of the bone is far too close to a human skeleton, even though it is this big. Not to advertise my water choice. But again, if we look at the fossil record, we have tangible proof, but it's not solid proof. At least not yet. And that kind of dips into why. Why are we not. Why are we. And this is kind of the crux of the question I ask my viewers, and the world and the universe, and whoever else is listening. Why are we so opposed to saying, yes, we think this is what happened, versus, and if we go against a norm, a mainstream, there's just no room for change, which is idiotic, because if these scientists are out there, their life is changed. Their life is changed. That's how it goes. I think this, you hypothesize, and then you test your theory, and then hopefully you get a result. Basic science, kids. I learned that in high school. But I digress. I guess some people just don't like to be wrong, and it's too hard to change my history books, or I really don't know. If it's that hard to change the history books, maybe you should go digital. Although that's corruptible too. Anyway, I digress yet again. Let us move on. Okay, real people who are really giant. I totally closed that on accident, and I didn't mean to. Okay. There he is. I hope that translates. Yeah, there he is. Okay. So this is Oliver Richter's and Alan Richardson from the show Jack Reacher from their last thing. Now, Oliver Richter here is 7'2". He's a big papa, and that's a real life human right there. And he doesn't have any obscure bone maladies or gland malfunctions in the pituitary, for example. He is just that big. And he's not the only one in his family who is decidedly larger. And if you look at this picture, we have Alan Richardson here, who is 6'5". Again, not exactly a short individual. And if you ever seen him with his shirt off, they do it at least once or twice during the Jack Reacher series. The dude's not exactly small. The guy works out, and so does Oliver Richter's. And I mean, the side-by-side comparison is vastly obvious. I mean, they're two powerful dudes. Even standing there with shirts on, they're both pretty powerful dudes. But Richter's probably can out punch him pound for pound as far as muscle goes. In reality. And they do explore that in this thing, and they're pretty realistic about their exploration of the contest of strength versus strength. You can only overpower a 7-foot tall dude, even if you're 6'5", so much. You might have a little bit of speed on him in a conflict situation, but reality is he is stronger than you. The reality is he can probably lift more than you can, even as a 6-foot tall individual. And I don't work out that much. If you have a 6'5" individual who is at peak condition, a 7-foot tall individual who either may be or is not, whether they are or not at peak physical condition, can probably do more than the guy with who's 6'5" at peak physical condition can, just on the physical level alone. So it kind of harkens back to why some of these guys were feared. I mean, that's kind of obvious. While some were protectors. Also has an obvious ring to it. And it's intriguing to consider what we have today versus what was happening even, 1,000 years ago? That we kind of documented. Before we take our break, actually, let's take our break first, and then we'll come back in. We'll see you in 80 seconds. This is the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and 105.3 in the Gulf Coast. UPRN Talkradio.com. Esoteric programming at its finest.
Our symbol, the trident, gifted to us by the priests of Troy Xenos centuries ago when one of the first monster hunting teams out of Corinth battled a contingent of Vrykolakas that had infested their temple. After the victory over the monsters, the head priest declared, "You are 3 lances acting as one, not unlike Poseidon's mighty trident of light." That would become our name, the Trident of Light, for the good we did and still do against the dark evils of this world.
Available at Amazon Books.
Follow us on Instagram at paranormal.insight. Stay informed on upcoming shows, ask questions, and see what chilling paranormal stories we're following. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube at paranormal_insight. Click the live tab to see our latest videos. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the show. My name's Tim Sudano. This is Paranormal Insight, and today we're talking about giants, the myth and the fact, or the myth and reality. Where do they overlap? Does one favor the other? So on and so forth. We just got through talking about the real giants in our lives. Again, this is Oliver Richter's. He showed up in the show Jack Reacher, and he is 7 foot tall. He's 7'2", excuse me, and pretty powerfully built individual. Obviously works out, but that is an example of a more modern day giant. I mean, he towers over Alan Richards there by a whole head, practically. So you have 6'5" versus 7'2". I mean, do the math. But and thank you, Heidi, for welcoming me back. I submit that giants are rather real. I mean, there's a perfect example of what I would consider a giant individual right there. But let's dive in a little bit more into the mythology of what a giant is. Okay, so last week we talked about the fairies and their stuff. There were giants and fairy stuff too. Yeah. There's one of them. This has a Game of Thrones vibe to it. Fun show. Enjoyed that show. I didn't get into the dragons one that much, but anyway. So we have giant individuals facing off against lesser individuals, and they seem to be kicking some butt. But, in both medieval Europe and in the more Celtic regions of that area, the basic area, we have tales of giants, mostly being creatures that were, again, purely chaotic, just spreading chaos and sin and paganism, apparently. Which is weird. This is in more medieval Europe, and they were always defeated by the Christian moral center, those who held that belief on the battlefield. And, they were given temporary powers to defeat these oversized individuals. Further, we have a more familiar take on fairies and giants in fairy tales. I'm sorry, I said fairies. Giants and fairy tales. We have, you may be able to pick this out, the tale of Jack and the Beanstalk. Now that is a true moral tale. How not to be, so easily outwitted and believe anything and everything. Or it could be a tale about how your beliefs can't come true if you put enough power into it. That actually harkens oddly into a little bit of witchcraft if you follow that at all, where your intent, you're putting enough intent into an object can actually render that object somehow special, or a producer of whatever it is you want it to produce. In this case, Jack believed in the magic beans, but his mom threw him out. So the belief powered those beans, perhaps. Big old giant beanstalk shoots up into the sky, and as he climbs it, he enters a realm where a giant lives. Again, the giant is the bad guy. Anyway. And the only way to defeat the giant is to force him to chase another beanstalk as fast as humanly possible, whereby he falls and is killed. That's some dark stuff, man. I mean, he couldn't just have slipped down the beanstalk and, I don't know, but the giant has to fall and die. Oh, man. Anyway. So the giant in this case was more of a challenge to humanity. Again, another repeated theme throughout history, where we have these giant folks just causing trouble, or well, it's kind of weird though, especially with Jack and the Beanstalk, because we have this kid who punches for lack of a better term, punches a hole into this guy's realm, this giant's realm, climbs this beanstalk, crosses over some weird threshold where among the clouds, or is it the clouds? Is it another Earth? Who knows? But in this other world he encounters, he's super smooth, super small. And then he causes enough trouble. I think he steals the golden egg from the goose that lays the golden eggs, and the giant chases him down. We all know how that ends. But it's interesting. That's invasion and thievery where I'm from. But because he was human, it was okay. So that's a poor lesson. In my view, that's a poor lesson. But I, again, digress. Let's also not forget yet another famous giant was this guy, Gulliver. Now, it's interesting thing about Gulliver is Gulliver was both the giant and the little guy. I found that fascinating that author, who's, gosh, I just forgot who wrote that, and it's not my notes. How silly of me. Anyway, I won't say Hans Christian Andersen, but I don't think that's right. But anyway, Gulliver's Travels really tells both sides of that story, and how people in these various lands that Gulliver encounters are really kind of petty and kind of looking at things from a very narrow scope. And that was kind of the moral of the whole story. Open your view up, your world view up, so you can really kind of determine what's going on for yourself, what the real matter is, as it were, when it comes to dealing with anyone. And some people may seem like giants. It's a lot of metaphor, basically. And some people may seem like lowly little people. But, it depends on how you're perceived. Don't be the guy that's perceived as the big mean giant or the mean little person. The moral kind of fluctuates and wobbles everywhere in that story. But nonetheless, we have a depiction here of what it means to be such an outcast among a society of other people who are mostly alike. Yet here you are, like the biggest thing in the world and the best thing. And I think they even put into work. It's like, could you help us build this stuff? Could you fix this wall? Could you build that dam? And he was put through his paces a little bit. it eventually he became something of a protector and and again, he follows the author, just borrowed from history, really, when it comes to these creatures. So, as we move on through our story, we'll see a lot of that constantly coming into view. Now, let's talk about real giant hunters. And I don't mean people actually going out and slaying giants. Yes, has been the case in our our little exploration here. But I want to talk about some brothers, actually. Jim and Bill Vieira. You probably have heard of them. You've probably seen their television shows. And there they are right there. But Bill and Jim here even had a series on the History Channel whereby they went, and they're both stonemasons. They're master stonemasons. They're experts in the field of masonry and historical masonry as well. So they know modern methods and they know the ancient methods very, very well. And these guys explored these various things. Now, they didn't find the bone there. That's from somewhere else. That's from, I think, South America. Oh, gosh. No, I'm sorry. That's from Austria. But the sites here in the corners, besides the guy with the giant leg bones sitting next to him, this dude's not exactly small. I think he's like 5'9", 5'10", almost 6 foot himself. And look how big that thigh bone is. And this is one of the few finds that actually backs up the story of there actually being giant humans. Some say this was faked. Others say, nope, that's real. So the contention continues. But Bill and Jim Vieira, yeah. At least I hope that's their name, have explored these various locations around the Austrian guy with the leg bone. Most of those, if not all of those, are here in America, in the U.S., chiefly, not exclusively, but chiefly in Ohio and Tennessee. They're called Native American stoneworks, but they predate a lot of Native American culture, which is very fascinating in and of itself. Now, a lot of folks think Native Americans or, rocking the wigwam or the teepee as their primary location. No, some of them actually built stone fortifications. And one example, if you can see it, if I can show you real quick, is this wall. You see this road here? There's a big wall right there. That is a crafted wall that has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's actually part of a fortification that was supposed to, it was a defense fortification, like this is the border of our land, stuff that type of thing. And yeah. And there's also something that says that wall was not built by the Native Americans, but by a earlier tribe of giants. And this also is backed up by Native American folklore. Not folklore, but lore. There are actual stories that are handed down. And that these individuals were of giant stature. And between 7 to 9 feet tall, typically, although some were described as being 12 feet tall, measuring a certain something similar to a cubit, but it was whatever the Native American relationship was to the cubit. Chiefly was, and so they would describe these tall and again red-haired beings, which I found doubly extra fascinating because that is the third reference we have to red-haired giants. And they're always they're here. And, and the Vieira's not only documented this stuff, but they've redocumented it. So they found old archaeological digs, their records, and stuff like that from the 18th and 19th century, and went back to those sites and redocumented everything and found new things, and were able to cement more or less that these structures, and some of them are deep underground. They're vaults that go into the hill, like this one here. That's called Calendar or something. The Calendar Room. I'm using my little arrow to highlight the one I'm talking about. But those slats in the roof line there, look, those are megalithic stones that were put on top of the walls here, and this is all relatively. That one's not underground per se, but it's part of an underground entrance. But if you stand in this area, through those various slats that are there in the calendar room, you will see the winter solstice and a few other very notable yearly occurrences, and I think even the autumnal equinox. And they're still accurate today. I think they're off by something like 0.3 degrees compared to where it should be in reality. And that kind of tells us about the age of these structures. Let me go back. Let's go back to the slide. You'll see me highlighting this area here. I'm sorry I didn't have bigger pictures. They weren't that high res when I got them anyway. But this is what's known as American Stonehenge, and it's been purposely collapsed, we think, by early American settlers. And it wasn't collapsed because, no one can know about it. The stones were harvested for other purposes. So, yeah, that happens, unfortunately. Over here, we have a more natural cave, but if you go into this cave, that is superbly structured stuff. And there are various other examples of these things that indicate a race of individuals that were a great deal taller, that had a higher sense of civilization to a degree compared to the Native Americans, who were, when these stories were first told to, American it's the settlers basically, I said, oh yeah, you got to watch out for this stuff. We've had problems. We can also tap into the more. I told this story, in the beginning of my first year, I think it was like episode 7 or 8, where I had Phil the Explorer on. Phil. He was constantly talking about the Pukwudgie. I mentioned the Pukwudgie in our fairy episode as well. But the Pukwudgie initially were defending the Native Americans who they were friendly with at the time, according to their legends, from giants. So, there we have it. More giants. And they're redheaded too. Oh my goodness. The theme just keeps repeating and repeating and repeating. Crazy stuff. Okay. So, pardon me. Jim and Bill Vieira, our buddies, who are master stonemasons, digging into what these creatures are. And as they're digging around, they find, and I'm not sure I can put it up. Well, I'll try it. I'm not sure what the next slide is. There it is. Okay, I'll get to these in a second. What these are? Oh, it didn't show up. It didn't translate. How very silly. Okay. Nope. Computer didn't forgive the. Yeah. Yeah, there we go. It kind of goes to this, but at the same time, I will tell you that Jim and Bill Vieira, I mentioned how they re-documented these various sites. They did that based on old news articles that made reports of finding legitimate giant-sized skeletal remains, humanoid for sure. I think one instance actually had them being polydactyl, where they had 6 digits on their hands and feet, but that was the only one. All the others were humanoid, but they were measured as being between 7 to 9 feet tall, echoes the legend. And these various vaults and tombs were constructed by a means that the Native Americans didn't really have. I mean, not all of them anyway. Some of them even adapted and took refuge in older structures. And that's kind of where the other thing, the other map I just showed you, there it is, kind of goes to. Now, there's something to be said that these structures are recycled. We've heard that before. Teotihuacan, that's I'm probably using the wrong name, but it's in Peru. Anyway, the Peru? Boy. Anyway, so if the Native Americans built these things, why did they abandon their ways and go purely agricultural? I mean, to borrow a verbiage, bear skins and stone tools. They had bows and arrows and stuff like that, and spears and all that fun stuff. But this was all made from flint and other types of, stone work. And they had a knowledge of it, obviously, stonework, but they're still living in as I mentioned before, the wigwams and the teepees. That it's a retrograde back, and they went completely agrarian. That is to say, actually, they went beyond agrarian. They went to hunter-gatherer mode. If this is a step back, because we have here depicted on the screen, these are fortifications with stone walls all the way around, very intricately placed, not unlike the road I showed. The road, there it is, down here in the corner. That wall, very, very, very intricate. So what we have are these stone forts, just the walls, mind you, where it appears the Native Americans actually took over certain areas, some of it ritualistically, some of it more as a means to defend against other tribes or what have you. But these were chiefly recycled spaces. So someone built this before the Native Americans really came along and claimed it as their own. There's also, harkening back to the legend, where the Native Americans had a problem with giants. And, these various, they actually went and decimated, that is, eradicated these giants because they were posing such a problem for them, the Native Americans. So it took a while apparently, but they wiped them out pretty much in one fell swoop. It was just a long campaign, and they say, we had to. It was a matter of survival. It was us or them, that type of thing. It is also interesting to note that a lot of these vaults and tombs with these megalithic stones that really were kind of outside the realm of manipulation when it came to the Native Americans, typically, not exclusively, but typically, there was a, while certain bits of these things were actually, as I said before, were taken by the settlers and whoever else happened upon them. Hey, I can use that stone for my house or whatever. And they they actually dismantled a lot of these tombs and vaults of these giants, where some people discovered giant remains. Now, we kind of get into a bit of a conspiracy when it comes to these remains. And, it comes down to all this evidence is gathered in the 18th and 19th centuries, as far as digs go and all that fun stuff, discovering these skeletal remains between 7 and 9 feet tall, sometimes larger. And they're all gathered up in the name of preservation by the Smithsonian. And I mean all the way down to Oaxaca, gathering all these remains, and, they'll be preserved. And they perhaps are preserved, or they were perhaps destroyed. We just don't know for sure. But they've been either locked away deep in vaults or what have you, or possibly destroyed to destroy that evidence, which is interesting to me because I don't know why you would hide that. Honestly, the implications of who and what these people are, or were, or are, is nothing. It's not just absolute short-sightedness to destroy that stuff, which makes you think it's archived. I'd like to think it's archived. I hope it is. But, yeah. Gone. We can enjoy their stuff. I mean, we got the one guy in Austria with a leg bone. Do you want to travel to Austria and look at a leg bone? Go ahead. I don't even know if that place is still open or available or what have you. But there's something to be said for a lack of true interest in the scientific method and in expanding the human understanding in anything, in any direction. I think it's paramount to continue to do that, but we really haven't been very good stewards, at least collectively. But, the two brothers have been recollecting all this evidence, so I'm actually very happy for them. Let's see here. So, as we continue our journey into exploring the giant, for the most part, like on a psychological basis, the giants represent an overwhelming force. This also plays into the anthropological perspective. They embody something to be overcome. They're a menace. They are chaotic. Never mind, some of them were also teachers and also protectors and that type of thing. So yeah, there's a kind of a mix of what we interpret the giant to be. The giants were, well, something to be, again, revered and feared. It's a fascinating dichotomy. They had a dual purpose. And whether they were this big, I don't know that they ever were, but this is another rendition of what a frost giant might look like. But, there's also something to be said for the more mythological legends about how some of these creatures inhabit or are part of the landscape. I was really loud when I said that. My apologies. But the landscape, that they are part of the stonework, or they are part of a given location and species. And sometimes incredible. They have the horns, and other times they're a little more humanoid-like. And then we have the art of the... Oh, no. Okay. Sorry. This also speaks to what I was saying before. This is kind of art in a sense. We have a sculpture here. Now, some have labeled this as a form of petrification. And we've seen the various indications of petrification. That this is what they really were. This is artistic. I'm sorry to say, this is a piece of ancient art, because we have a rock face here that kind of looks like a torso. It leans down, and then they shape this rock to kind of look humanoid. And unfortunately, that is not legitimately a petrification. Although we've seen other examples that's not one for sure. But I liken this image with this image in that they are reverent of a larger scale individual, like a giant. Like these guys, for example. And this is a weird interpretation of that, but there's this too. I guess my petrification thing has to rest with this one, but you may have seen the petrification in Iceland, which has the elephant, which is pretty cool. A whole island shaped like a gigantic elephant, and it looks like the elephant's just kind of captured in time in Iceland. So I don't know where ancient Icelandic people would get the image of an elephant. So I'm going to say that's just a strange little inclusion there that they added. But not that they added, but that it's definitely worth including. I wish I had a picture of it to show you, but unfortunately I don't. But we also have not only let me stick with this petrification thing for a second here. We know about the Icelandic elephant looking island thing. You can look that up. There's a Gila monster looking thing, but if you look closely enough, it is carved. It's just a rock that juts out of the ground. And they painted an eye on it at one point and carved the stone just so to make it look more like a petrified lizard. And there's some other things throughout the world that kind of look like animals or people even. There's a reclining person, or I'm sorry, a person in repose, where repose? No. They're asleep. They're on the ground, they're sleeping, and it looks like a human just curled up, and a giant curled up and died right there. And there is a legend in that area of that being the case, that this hillside is really the remains of a giant woman who was waiting for her husband to return from a conflict of some sort, and he never did, and she died there, waiting for him. There's also an Alaskan story that tells a very similar story. I think the one I just mentioned is Celtic in nature. There's one in Alaska. It's a mountain range called the Sleeping Woman. And an artist went in and actually kind of manipulated things a little bit to make it look like a sleeping woman was just sitting there. No, that was pure art. But the hillside at one point or another resembled the facade of a woman on her side. And it looked... I guess they made a legend out of it. Who knows? Made up a legend. Or perhaps something really bizarre did happen there. But it's interesting that nothing is really surfaced. And if it is, apparently the Smithsonian will swoop in and take it away from us. But when it comes to telling these stories and getting that information out there, it's a matter of really kind of giving credence to not only images such as this, but allowing science and discovery to actually flourish. And I think that's one of the biggest sins modern world has really done to its scientists. They have legends that are worthy of explanation. They actually have evidence to one degree or another that speaks to these individuals. But it's not being given credibility or any sort of, I don't know. It's not being taken seriously enough, in my personal estimation. I guess that's the way we have to really look at it. And the legends of these creatures continue on and on and on and on and on. I know this is a recycled image. I'm sorry about that. But it also goes to having I don't know, the dumbing down of society to really give it a label. And I'm not really a fan of labels, but we are not a stupid people. We don't always act the smartest way in the world, but I think by and large, given the opportunity, I think we'd surprise a lot of people, including ourselves. The enduring legacy of these creatures through art, through fiction, I mean, generation to generation has to have, I think, a kernel of truth somewhere in our distant past, and even in our modern experience. Again, we've seen the videos of giants walking the ridge, and they got to be easily 20, 30 foot tall individuals. It could be CGI, who knows? But I mean, I saw something recently, I think it was out of Carolina or something like that, and this dude's walking on the ridge and gigantic. And if it was CG, very well done. I know CG when I see it, even modern day AI. It's not 100%. It's easy enough for me to spot, but not for everyone. And that particular image I'm referencing to, unfortunately, I should have put that in here, but I didn't. But that one gave me pause, made me consider, and it's like possible. Nope. That the end of it? Oh, that's sad. Okay. So let me go back to the beginning. There he is. Okay, so our giant friend here, and those like him. Again, a big red-haired giant. Hey, I did its research. I have to give credits due. There's something to be said for having the same thing happen throughout history, through different regions of the world, telling about the exact same creature. That's very, very telling to me when it comes down to what are we experiencing? What have we experienced as people? As those who simply collect these things and talk about them on a podcast like this, to being the people who are actually out in the field, like the Vieira brothers, who are systematically rediscovering these virtually lost discoveries and just giving them new light and new credence and a new sense of exploration, and kind of really still keeping on. It's like the UAP stuff we hear. We see all these trials, all these whistleblowers come forward, but we're not really getting a lot of traction on it. The baby steps are perhaps too small. Now there's those who are saying, well, wait for this date. I think one of the dates is coming up at the end of the month, actually. But wait for this date and all will be revealed. Okay. I don't see all being revealed. I see far too many baby steps. I think it's time for a larger step. Personally, if you're going to throw, I don't think it'll throw the world into chaos. Maybe some people will freak out, but I think by and large, at least those of us who are intelligent enough to pay attention to this type of thing and give it any sort of credence whatsoever, have the ability to take others under our wing, for lack of a better term. And I'm talking about you, those of you in the chat, those of you who are just watching and listening. There's more. We can handle it. I'm convinced we can handle it. I was in the government system for a long time, and yeah, I was oohed and awed and wowed and stuff like that. I didn't lose my mind, though. If anything, maybe dive deeper, maybe want to know more. And I think that's the take. We people who are interested in this stuff, and I think by and large, the people in the world not only can handle the truth, not to quote that movie, but we can handle the truth and we can take on the new information. I don't think it's going to be the massive, the chaotic thing that happened in the 30s when a few people listened to the radio caught the War of the Worlds, 5 minutes into their broadcast and missed the beginning, which clearly told them this is a radio broadcast brought to you by da 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 da, and then they jumped into the story. And Heidi agrees with me. We got this, and we're always looking for deeper meanings, and I think we're gonna get those answers eventually. But I guess I'm impatient, and I think the world at large is pretty impatient as well when it comes to this type of thing. These discoveries should not be shielded from us. These discoveries should not be kept secret from us. We deserve to know. We really do. And that's my opinion. And Heidi adds, shine bright and hold the light. I like that. That's very nice. And you know what? We're going to stop a little bit early this week. I hope that's okay. But I want to thank all of you out there for joining us. And those in the chat, thanks for chatting. And I'm sorry for the technical fluff. Big thank you again to Julie N for pointing out that my mic was muted. Oh, that's too funny. So, with that, my name is Tim Sudano. This is Paranormal Insight, and we have been talking about giants and their mythology and their very, very potential fact that they are real, or at least were, perhaps, real individuals. Heidi says thank you. I think for all of them, and I thank you as well. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time on Paranormal Insight.
If you have a paranormal experience that you would like to discuss on the show, please email us at paranormal.insight.podcast@gmail.com. That's paranormal.insight.podcast@gmail.com.
I tried to say goodbye, but the button won't work. This is fun. It's totally fun. Nope, that's not it. There it is. Nope, that's not it either. All right, goodbye, everyone.